Good morning, Vision. Surely it's been a better morning than that. Good morning, Vision. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, there's my crowd over there. So it's just an honor to be up here and to share this word on this miraculous series that we're involved in. And so what I want to talk about is our subtopic of this miraculous series today is called the miracle process. The miracle process. And so what I want to do is I want to start out by asking you a question. What is God doing in me when he is performing a miracle? What is God doing in me when he is performing a miracle? And I feel like the best way for us to begin to kind of attack this question is to pull out some words, right? So we can all be on the same page and it'll kind of set the stage as we move into John chapter 11. So we're going to pull out the idea of miracle and we're going to define it. Okay, put a definition to it. And then we're going to pull out this idea of doing, what is God doing in me? We're going to pull that idea out and we're going to define it. Okay, so let's start with miracle. Now, when you look at that word miracle, Greek word of it comes from the word dunamis, which means power, right? It actually is used in reference to works of supernatural character. So when I see God's character and I see God's power, right, they're one and the same. His character and his power are one and the same. And so I begin to see that God is not just powerful, right? God is power, right? There's a difference, right? So power is not just a part of his personality and nature, right? It is, but it's not just that because his personality and nature is power. Power is his disposition. Power is a part of his makeup. He is power, right? So when you look at this definition of miracle, right, what you begin to see is that a miracle is when God openly displays the depths of his power and character on our behalf. For my little situation, right? He displays the depths of his power and character on my behalf. So let's tease out this doing. Let's tease out the doing because God is doing, something's happening, and I would say that is a process that's going on inside of me. And so there's a process that's occurring in me that is just as important as the miracle I'm expecting and hoping for. This process that is occurring in me is just as important, right, as the action of God displaying his power and character on my behalf. So let's define this process. Let's pull it out and define it, right? So this process is the relationship building procedure that is occurring between me and God as I am anticipating God's miracle. This is a relationship building procedure that is occurring between me and God as I am anticipating his miracle, as I am anticipating him showing up strong on my behalf with his power and his character. Great example, right? A marriage. And so, if you have a couple who is struggling in their marriage, or maybe their marriage is having some issues and some problems, and so that couple goes to God and they begin to pray to God and they seek him out, right? And their hearts start to become emotionally tied to what they anticipate God to do for them, right? To heal the marriage, to help them communicate better, argue less. And that's what we do, right? We pray to God and then our hearts become emotionally tied to how we think God will look when he shows up, right? And then we begin inside of this process with God as we trust him because maybe my spouse is saying the right things and doing the right things just out of nowhere. And we're like, oh, God, this is awesome. You're doing exactly what I thought it would look like, God. And then all of a sudden, then one day, something traumatic may happen, or maybe your spouse begins to say something wrong or do something wrong. And you're like, okay, God, it's not looking like it should right now. You better, God, you got to get to work. Come on. Make it look like I thought it was supposed to look like, how I was anticipating it to look like, right? And then, so now there's this back and forth. There's this process, right? So I'm trusting and now I'm not trusting, but all at the same time anticipating this outcome that I've been thinking and praying about, right? But God has us right where he wants us because in this process, he's going to use this process to tighten up some things pertaining to how we see him and how we relate to him. So there's three things he's going to do with this. The first thing is that this process will impact my perspective on God's timing. It's going to impact my perspective on God's timing because a lot of times what we do is we like to look at God and say, God, now it would be perfect if you showed up right here or right there, or it's going to look like this at this specific time, right? A lot of us have been waiting weeks, months, and years for God to show up exactly how we think he should show up, right? Some of us to the point to where we've been waiting so long that we said, God, I give up on how I feel like you should show up. Some of us have even gotten to the point to where we've kind of put God on the shelf now. We say, God, I give. You're not going to show up the way I need you to show up for me. I give. And they've put God on the shelf and said, God, I'm going to put one foot in front of the other and I'm going to figure this process out. Right? And God's here to tell you, if you just stick with me in this process, I'm going to shift your perspective on timing. And you'll begin to trust my timing and not your timing. The next thing he wants us to look at is this process will show us how to look past my personal expectation of how God should deliver to me. This process will show me how to look past my personal expectation of how God should display his power on my behalf. See, because he wants me to look past how I think he should show up for me, right? And he wants me to focus on some more eternal truths, some more firm truths about who he really is. Great example. I went out into my garage the other day, and hot water heaters dripping water everywhere in the garage. Now, to a homeowner, that's like, wow, really? God, you gonna do this? And here's the crazy part about it is we had just done the budget, firmed it up. We figured out how we were going to give. We put aside all the money to give and got Christmas all set up. And I'll put the debt here. Oh, we going to knock it out. And just so excited. Like, God, oh, God. My wife got paid a couple $100 more than she really usually does. And you're like, oh, God, you're showing off now. You're just showing off. You're just showing off, God. And you're like, this is exactly how it's going to look, God. You showed up. Awesome, thank you. Then I walk out to the garage, and in all of 2 seconds, I'm like, God, what you doing? You just messed up what you set up, God. You messed it up. And then I begin to go into this thing where I start telling God, okay, God, we still can fix it, God. We still can fix it. Here's what we'll do, God. Okay, we got a couple extra $100. I'll call the plumber up. He'll tell me it's going to cost the same amount of money that we got for extra. And then now you can show up. So now it's going to look like that. So I'm anticipating that you're going to show up strong on my behalf just like that. So go ahead, you do that, God, and we'll make it work, right? And then that's what we always do, right? Right? What we're anticipating, God has to look like that now, right? Or he's done something wrong. And so, but what if that plumber comes to my house on Monday and says, Kev, $2,000. And what if I don't have it? I don't. Is he still good? Is his judgment still to be trusted? Is his character still power? Because I'm here to tell you, that his credibility is not hurt just because he didn't deliver the way I think he ought. This process we're talking about will help me look past my expectations and focus on some more eternal truths. The third thing that this process is going to do is going to help me to see and understand the depths of God's overwhelming commitment to me growing spiritually. So now we've talked about this miracle process, right? And we see there's this process going on in me, back and forth, trusting, not trusting, and as I am anticipating God to show up on my behalf. And so as we begin to move into John 11, I want you to keep two things in the forefront of your brain. I want you to know that a miracle is not just something that occurs in an isolated moment, right? And the second thing is that when God openly displays the depths of his power in one action, that action of a miracle, individual lives are impacted, not just due to a one-time miracle, but also due to a process that's occurring in me, right? So let's dive in, right? Let's dive into John chapter 11. Beautiful, beautiful story going on in John chapter 11. And so you see this family that loves Jesus, and Jesus loves this family. You got Lazarus, Mary, and Martha. Brothers and sisters, right? I mean, really, to get a good picture at who they are and how much they love Jesus, you take a look at Mary, right? Same Mary that took that alabaster flask, right? And she just busted all over top of Jesus, right? Now, before we even get into that, the idea that she broke it was just crazy, because in our economy, that flask was a year's worth of wages and probably was somewhere around in the ballpark of $20,000. Crazy, right? But she did that. And then she went even lower, humbled herself even more, and got on her knees, put her nose into the dirt next to the feet of Jesus, right? Right? And began to wipe his feet off. And if that wasn't a low enough position to be in respect to who he is, she decided to take her hair, which was a symbol of who she was, of everything she was in that society as a woman, right? Takes her hair and then begins to rub not the dirt off his feet, because now it's mud. She begins to move the mud back and forth with her hair off of his feet. See, that's the love and the commitment and the view they had of him, right? And so then you see another picture of Jesus in the home of Mary and Martha and Lazarus, right? And you see the picture, the idea shows Mary at the feet of Jesus getting taught by Jesus face to face, nose to nose. Martha's in the kitchen. She's doing things and preparing the home. Just imagine that. Jesus is in your home. You're sitting at his feet and he's teaching you about his character, the deepness of who he is. And then someone's in the kitchen. Jesus, it's almost ready. Jesus, your fries is almost ready. You want cheese on that burger, Jesus? Jesus, what you want, potato bread, Jesus? Come on. They are building a relationship with this man, with this God man. They love him. He loves them. They followed him, heard him teach, and now Lazarus, word is out that Lazarus is sick. He's not feeling well. And you see in John 11, 3, 5, and 6, it says, the sisters therefore sent to him saying, Lord, behold, the one whom you love is sick. And that's how you know he loved them so much. They didn't even have to say his name. They just said the one you love. And out of all the people that Jesus knew, he thought, oh, Lazarus. Now, Jesus, verse 5, loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. And when therefore, then he heard that he was sick, he stayed then 2 days longer in the place where he was. Now, let me tell y'all a little something. I have a friend named Brucey Hall. And me and Brucey Hall have been friends since we were in kindergarten. And so if I heard Brucey Hall was sick, I'm going back to New Jersey. I'm dropping everything. I'm getting with Jamie, and I'm saying, look, I got to go to New Jersey because he's sick. I've built a relationship with him. And if I waited 2 days to go see him, my family would think badly about me. My friends would be like, what is wrong with you? You're not normal. You need to go support him and love him and be near him. What people would say. And if I didn't do it, people would think I'm not normal. And I'm not saying we should not go see those who are hurting, who are close to dying. That's exactly what you should do because that's normal, right? That's what you do. But see, now we begin the shift that we're about to dive into because Jesus shows you right then and there. Your timing and your idea of what is perfect and how you show up for someone is sometimes different than what I have planned. I know you're anticipating this, but I have something that sometimes looks a little different, and it's always better. And so now, Lazarus has eventually died. Jesus has waited 2 days, right? Not only has he waited 2 days, but it takes 2 days to get to where he's going. So it's 4 to 6 days, almost a whole working week. We go crazy because it's Tuesday and Wednesday. We're like, oh my gosh, is the week going to be over? Right? He waits a whole working week to get to the one he loves. And you've got to understand the moment of what's going on here. Okay, you've got to understand the moment because you have mourners there crying and weeping. They're hurting. This man has died, right? The sisters are overwhelmed with emotion. It's taken him 4 to 6 days to get there. And not only are they hurting because their brother has died, but they're hurting because the one that they love, the one that they've trusted, the one that they've humbled themselves and wiped mud off his feet with their hair, and they've listened to him talk about how much he loves them. And they've been face to face and nose to nose with him in their home. This man has not showed up for them the way they would anticipate because surely, God, you're going to show up speedily for Lazarus. You love him. You showed up for the Roman soldier's daughter. You showed up for the Roman soldier's servant, right? We don't even like the Romans. And surely we don't like the servants. But you showed up like this and did it from far away. You called a tax collector your best friend. You're healing children. You're doing all kinds of things like this. Surely when you hear Lazarus is sick, you are going to come right now. You're going to drop everything and show up. It's going to look like this, God. And then when it doesn't, they're hurt. You got to understand the moment that's going on. They are hurt, deeply hurt and scarred by Jesus. And so when Martha sees Jesus, she runs out to see him. Now, what would you say to Jesus? What would be your response to Jesus? What is your response to Jesus when his timing to you seems messed up? What do you say to him? Well, I'm going to tell you what she said eye to eye, face to face to Jesus. Martha therefore said to Jesus, Lord, if you would have been here, my brother would have not died. Even now I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you. She looked him in the face and said, God, you messed up. Now, obviously, she doesn't grasp fully who Jesus is because she's saying you can go to God and get what you want from God. And he's the God man, right? So she doesn't fully grasp that. Nobody at that time really kind of fully grasped that idea, right? But you see the process, the internal struggle, right? She's like, God, your timing is messed up. You've messed this up. I'm going to tell you, you should have shown up and it should have looked like this, but you still can give me what I'm anticipating. I'm anticipating this. I'm anticipating you doing something strong on my behalf for my brother, and you still can do it, God. You still can do it. And Jesus is looking at her, and Jesus, he's thinking, I need her to not question my timing. I need her to not continue to anticipate how it should have looked. I need her to look past that into a more deep truth of who I really am, of what I've really come to do, the overarching picture, right? And he wants that for us, right? He wants her to know he's more than this man who can go to God and get whatever he wants, right? He wants us to know that he's more than a miracle maker. He's more than that God who can show up and give us exactly what we want. It's more than that, right? And Jesus looks her in the eye in verse 25 and 26, and he says, it's good. I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me shall live even if he dies, and everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? He's looking at her thinking, I'm going to do something that's going to change the landscape of religion in this nation as you know it. Living out life brings pain. It brings fear. Approaching death brings pain. It brings fear. Losing loved ones, it brings pain and fear. Suffering through sickness, us watching someone suffer through sickness, it hurts us. But you want to know what? God looks at Martha and says, you want to know what? I am the resurrection. Believe in me, not just because I can do something for you, not just because I can show myself strong on your behalf. Don't just believe on me for that. Believe in me because I am the resurrection. I am everything that is associated with power that will defeat death in fear, in pain, in the pain that accompanies it. And he's trying to tell Martha the same way he's trying to tell us. Focus on the fact that I am the resurrection. Then all the pain and all the fear that comes with death and life will lose its sting and power. You see, the first Christians, they didn't have the word the way we have it, right? They didn't have that, right? They didn't have the scriptures. I mean, the first Christians, right? They didn't have the scriptures. They didn't, even the Old Testament that we see now that the Jews use, they couldn't even speak that language, some of the new Christians, right? They didn't have the things that we have to really and truly believe in Jesus, right? Here's what they had. They had the idea that there was a man who beat death and everything that's associated with it. And it started a windstorm of belief. And then hundreds and thousands of hundreds began to follow this man who beat death and everything associated with it. That's all they had. That's all they had. That's all they needed. And Jesus is looking at Martha and he's trying to tell her, this is all you need. I am the resurrection. Trust in the power of what I'm saying to you. And then as she's faced with these ideas and these teachings and she begins to pull down some of the droppings of this idea, right? Because she doesn't fully understand this resurrection, but as Jesus speaks this, he knows as we sit in these chairs today, we know. And Mary says, yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ. And she walks away thinking, I don't know what you're going to do, but something's going to happen. Something's going to happen. So then the next person you see that walks up, and Mary has quite the same response, right? She has quite the same response that her sister had, right? It's Mary's turn. And in verse 32, she says, therefore, It says, therefore, when Mary came where Jesus was, she saw him and fell at his feet, saying to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would have not died. Again, Jesus probably thinking, oh, gosh, I just preached a whole sermon to you, to your sister, and this whole crowd. And now I got to deal with this again. But Jesus doesn't do that, right? What Jesus does is he doesn't take that as a moment to teach her about how his timing is always good. He doesn't take that as a moment to try to show her how to look past what she thinks God's going to look like and to focus more on his eternal truths of his power, of his resurrection. He doesn't do that. He does a different thing, right? He wants to show her and the crowd something different, right? So in verse 33, 34, and 35, we read, Jesus therefore saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her also weeping. He was deeply moved in his spirit and was troubled and said, where have you laid him? And they said to him, Lord, come see. And then it says, Jesus wept. Jesus wept. Now this wept is not Jesus going, okay, all right, I'm good. Now what are we going to do? No. This idea of the word wept, it means to mourn, to cry out loud. Think of the moment where you felt the most overwhelmed with tears in your life. Right? Some of y'all may have been very close to that situation because maybe it just happened. Think of how it overwhelmed you emotionally to the point to where you couldn't stand. You had to fall to the ground. You're just hurting, right? Deep pain. That was Jesus crying out loud because he loved this man. And Jesus is crying out loud. And the whole crowd sees it. And Mary sees it, and Martha sees it, and the crowd is moved, and they look at him and they say, oh my gosh, look how much he really loved Lazarus. Look how much he really loved him. You see, Jesus is deeply committed to you in this process, right? And we talked about that idea of how he's overwhelmingly committed to you. See, he's not just committed with his power, but his power is there. And he's not just committed with his ability to heal, but his ability to heal is there. He's committed with his emotions. With every desire on the inside of him, he's committing it to you. In this process, as you begin to anticipate how he will move and what he will do, he's committed everything on the inside of him. See, God is not a God on a mountain watching you go through hurt and pain and then says, well, time for me to swoop down. It's not how it works, right? He's involved to the point of tears and emotional intensity. He's right there with me. And this is good because this is for the Christians who know Jesus. He's not just next to you, or he doesn't just have his arm around you. He's in you. He's the power we've been talking about. He's the character we've been talking about, but he's in you. You don't have to search for him. He's there. And for those who are leaning in, trying to figure out who Jesus is, and maybe they're trying to figure out, is Jesus for me? Is he not for me? I'm here to tell you today, he wants to be inside of you. Jesus wants to live in you. Eventually, Lazarus is raised from the dead. He's raised from the dead. There's this miraculous moment that occurs that he comes out of the grave and everybody around that situation is moved because Jesus showed his power and character in a miraculous style. But I'll tell you this. I think the moment leading up to the miracle, I think stuck with not just Mary and Martha, but the crowd the most. I think the teaching of timing and resurrection, the power of his resurrection that he talked to with Mary as the crowd was watching, I think that stuck with them. Right? I think the lesson of everyone seeing how God loves and how he's emotionally committed to those that he loves. I think for the crowd to see that and for Martha and Mary to see that, I think that did a lot. And I think if you take away that process, what everyone saw and went through, if you take that away from the end result of Lazarus being raised up, I think the end result loses what it was really meant to have, right? So, in closing, Jesus wants to use the moments leading up to a miracle to build my relationship with him. He wants to transform my idea of his timing. Right? Timing didn't look like his timing. He wants to focus me on the power of his resurrection. Right? And then the other idea is that God is deeply committed to my process. Not just with his power and not just with his might, but with his tears. Bottom line, church, examine your life for your own miracle process and invite God into every moment of it.